Hello, my name is Mr. Abbott, and welcome to today's lesson on grammar. This is the first introductory lesson that's going to get you started and help you understand some of the foundational ideas that are going to be built upon later. And so let's get right to it. The first thing I want to go over when we're talking about grammar is an essential part of any sentence. It's just the verb. It's the action of the sentence. And really, if you can find the verb in an English sentence, it can give you a lot of information about the rest of the sentence. And so there's some essential vocabulary related to the verb that I want you to know. There's verb, action verb, state verb, to be verb, and helping verb, also called auxiliary verbs. And we'll go over those shortly. And so the verb of the sentence is the word or words that describe the action that's taking place in the sentence, right? And so verbs tell what something is doing. It tells what the subject of the sentence is doing. It could be running, thinking, waiting. It could be also what state it's in, right? And these are a little bit harder to find because you're looking for an action, but they're not really a visible action, which I'll talk a little bit more. And so going into that, not all verbs are action verbs. We have action verbs like run, jump, swim, climb, say, somersault. You could watch these things happen and be like, okay, that person is doing that action, right? It's very easy to imagine. But then there are what are called state verbs, and these tell what state or condition somebody is in, right? You couldn't actually see them if you were to look at that person. Somebody knowing something or understanding or having something or loving something or something costing a certain amount or something continuing, right? These are all things that tell what state something's in, but you wouldn't be able to look at somebody and see that as an action. But these are actions, they are the verbs of the sentence. They tell what something is more or less doing, right? And when something, if we say, I know, what I'm doing is knowing, right? That's how we can typically tell the difference between a verb and other parts of the sentence because the verbs are the actions, they're things that you do. Now, there's going to be this huge list of verbs that students frequently have trouble identifying. And these are the to be verbs, right? And so this is am, is, are, was, and were, and been in some situations, right? And so this is a state verb, right? It shows the state of existing somewhere. And these are verbs. Anytime you see these are verbs. It's just easiest to remember it that way. So am, is, are, was, were are verbs. I'm mentioning that because you might see them and not recognize them because they don't seem like actions, but they are. And so there's something else called an auxiliary verb. And an auxiliary verb just goes to help the regular verb. So the verb of the sentence can be one word, right? I ran faster than my competition. Ran is the verb of that sentence, right? It could be two words long, right? I can run faster than my competition. The verb could be three words long. I could have run faster than my competition. It could be up to five words long, even. I should not have been running faster than my competition. And so here, ran or run is always the main verb, but there's other verbs that are here helping it, right? Like should, have, been, right? These are the words that are called auxiliary verbs. They help the main verb get more meaning. They change how the verb is happening, right? I can run. I could have run. These are all auxiliary verbs. So we have the main verb and the auxiliary verbs. But all of these things go together to create what's called the verb, right? And the verb of the sentence is all the words put together. And so some examples of auxiliary verbs, most commonly the to be verb, am, are, is, was, were, be, and been will be helping verbs. To have is oftentimes a helping verb. Have, has, and had. And then there's what are called modals. And these are these words such as would, could, should, will, can, may, must, have to. These all work to show a certain condition that the verb is in. And so all of these work together and they act as verbs in the sentence and they help the sentence along. Now, hopefully, from reviewing that, you know the terms verb, action verb, state verb, to be verb, and helping verb. I would recommend practicing this on IXL. If you don't have your IXL login, I would recommend speaking to me as soon as possible so I can give you that information. You can click on these links here to go straight to the activities. You can also open these links later in the slides on my website if you need to wait for a future time to do that. Now would be a good time to practice. Please pause this video and practice verbs. All right, if you pause the video and you practice verbs, you might be ready to move on to the next portion of the lesson, which is the subject. So we've learned the verb of the sentence. We also need to know what's called the subject, and that's who or what is doing the action of the sentence. It's typically what the sentence is about. And so there's two words I need you to know. There's the simple subject, which is a noun that describes who or what is performing the action of the sentence, right? And so if I were to say the Canadian rapper Drake has many hits in the United States, we can see the verb is has, right? And who has? Well, Drake has. Drake is the one doing the action. And this is why it was important to find the verb before I went into this, because if you can find the verb, you can ask yourself, who is doing this action, right? So the Canadian rapper Drake is the simple subject, but we're not usually interested in the simple subject. What we're going to be interested in more often is what's called the complete subject. And in the complete subject, it's all of the words that describe who or what is performing the action of the sentence. And so I'm not just talking about Drake, I'm talking about the Canadian rapper Drake. All of this is telling who I'm talking about and who is doing the action of the sentence. And so the complete subject, right? Now, words like he, I, they, she, we are almost always subjects. However, words like me, him, them, her, us are never subjects. Those will, if you ever see those words, they are never the subject of the sentence, right? And so if you'll know it sounds weird if you use them as subjects. It makes it sound like you're talking like a caveman, right? If you say I'm hungry, you change that to meme hungry or me am hungry, you sound like a caveman talking. If for a native English speaker, you'll notice like immediately when you use these as subjects, like that's not right. We never do that. And so that's why these never show up as subjects. 99% of the time, the subject is going to come before the verb in English. Questions are really the only exception. And so we have what's called an SVO language, right? English, we go subject, verb, object. And so in English, the subject always comes before the verb, and the verb comes second, and the object comes last. And so we say, Henry ate the sandwich, right? And so ate is the verb. And so if we find the verb of the sentence, we know the subject is just right there to the left of it, right? So the subject's always going to be to the left of the verb. And this is why it was important to find the verb first, right? And if we change these out of order, you can see what other languages, how they would phrase this, right? An OVS language would say the sandwich ate Henry. But for us, that sounds like the sandwich is the one doing the eating, right? Ate Henry the sandwich if the verb comes first. Ate the sandwich Henry could be another way of stating it. Henry the sandwich ate, and sandwich Henry ate, right? That sounds like the beginning of a sentence for us, but yeah. Here, English is always SVO, right? These other things will confuse your reader if you use them, or just be like, people be like, you're not speaking English properly, right? We want the subject first, the verb second, and the object third. And so that's why it's really important to be able to find the verb. If you can find the verb, just look to the left of it, and that is the subject. If you ever see something that's to the right of the verb, and you're like, well, I think that's the subject, it's not. The subject is never to the right of the verb in English. That's not the way our language works. And so sometimes you will see here that there's something before the subject, like here in the sandbox, the girl played with a toy truck. So the verb is played, right? And so if we look right before it, to the left of it, that's our subject. But here we have something here that goes before the subject. And there will typically be a comma placed here if something comes before our subject in English. We don't like to do this really. We can do it, but typically we like these things on the end, right? And so let's take this moment to practice finding the subject of the sentence. Once again, go to IXL, click on the link here or click on the link in the slides and take a few minutes, get to about 80 or 90% mastery on the subject, and come back and pause the video and unpause it when you are done. Moving on, the final portion of this lesson, identifying complete sentences. And so this is what we were working towards. This is essential. If you want to be able to improve your grammar, you need to be able to identify a complete sentence. And so the question is, how do you know when you've completed a complete sentence in English? See if you can come up with an answer. Do you know when you've completed a complete sentence, right? How do you know that you can put a period on that paper and end the sentence, and that you have a grammatically correct thing that comes before it? Well, what you're looking for is going to be apparent in a second. But there's a couple words I want you to know. There's what's called a phrase, which is a small group of words that work together as a unit. And then there's what's called a clause or a sentence, right? For your purposes right now, you can think of clauses and sentences as being the same thing. But it's a little bit, the clause is a little bit less than a sentence. A sentence can be multiple clauses together, but one clause can be a sentence. But anyway, I want you to kind of associate clause and sentence. They mean about the same thing. And we'll talk about that here. But I also want you to remember a phrase, because typically a phrase is not a complete sentence, and you can't use it as a complete sentence. And so what makes a sentence? Well, a sentence must have three things. First, a subject, which we learned. Secondly, a predicate with a verb. And three, make a complete thought. If it has those three things, then it is a complete sentence. It has a subject, a predicate, and makes a complete thought. If you ever need to know, do I have a complete sentence? You need to look. Does it have a subject? Does it have a predicate with a verb? Does it make a complete thought? And let's take a look at what some of these things are. Once again, the subject, as we mentioned before, is the word or phrase that explains who or was performing the action of the sentence. I, he, she, we, they, they're almost always subjects. And 99% of the time, the subject comes before the predicate in English. The predicate is the part of the sentence containing a verb, direct object, and any modifiers. Pretty much once you've found the subject, everything else is the predicate as long as it has a verb. If you found the subject and then you see a verb, just pretty much assume everything else is the predicate, right? If you really want to think of the predicate as just like a verb, you want to say that a sentence has a subject, a verb, and makes a complete thought, then you're probably okay thinking of it that way too. And so let's take a look here. If we have the sentence, Susie is hungry, is this a complete sentence? How about I am hungry? I am hungry and tired. He and I are hungry. He and I are hungry and tired. Are these complete sentences? What do we need? We need a subject, a predicate, and a complete thought. So let's take a look here. Susie is hungry is a complete sentence. Susie is the subject. Is the verb. So is hungry is the predicate. Susie is the subject. Predicate. Does it make a complete thought? Yes, it does. I am hungry. I am the subject. Am hungry is the predicate. Makes a complete thought. I am hungry and tired. Same thing. I am the subject. The rest is the predicate, and it makes a complete thought. He and I are hungry, right? Here, he and I is the subject. Are is the verb, and hungry is the predicate. And he and I are hungry and tired. Same thing. Here, he and I is the subject. Are is the verb. The rest of it is the predicate. All of these are complete sentences. Now, there's one exception to every sentence having a subject, and that's what's called our imperatives, right? So these are command words. And in English, we don't really, we leave the subject out of commands because the subject is implied, right? So when I say jump, meaning the implied subject is you. You jump. Go grab me a snack. Try again. Those are complete sentences. But they don't have a subject, right? But it's only in this imperative form where the subject can be left out. The verb is usually the first word of the sentence in these cases. And so let's see, is it a sentence? My best friend, Julian. Let's see, does this have a subject? Yeah, my best friend, Julian. Does it have a predicate? No, it does not. So this is not a complete sentence. Look at that. Does it have a subject? No. Does it have a predicate? Yes. Look is the verb at that. Is it an imperative? Yeah. So this is a complete sentence because it's an imperative, right? I thought we were done. So here, I is the subject, thought we were done is the predicate. It makes a complete thought. This is a sentence. And finally, forgot to get it, right? Here, that's not an imperative. It doesn't have a subject, so that's not a complete sentence. And so, quick review, how do you know when you've written a complete sentence in the English language? The answer, you have a subject, a predicate, and it makes a complete thought. Take this time and practice on IXL, the identifying a complete subject and predicate of a sentence, and move on to the next level, compound sentences when you are ready. Good luck.